Hello everyone. Today's lecture is going to be on panoramic and extraoral radiography. It's a very important topic because panoramic radiography, or in short what we call as an OPG, has become very staple today in terms of general practice in dentistry. So we'll be studying about panoramic radiography in detail, their principles, their indications, and their applications, and also other extraoral radiographic methods and their applications. These are the learning outcomes. So to start with panoramic radiography, the image you see on the screen is a panoramic, a periodontic panoramic radiograph. So the term panoramic is derived from the word pan. So panorama means you are covering a very wide area. So usually when you're trying to take a picture, you try to whatever comes fits in a single frame, you take a picture of it. But panorama is a mechanism where you try to make it wider. That is, you are taking multiple frames and fitting it into a single picture. And this pan is like a semicircle. It's like a half circle. That frames that you are trying to cover is like almost that of a semicircle, but it will be taken out and laid out straight into you. Nowadays, we have this application in most of our mobile phones. We have the ability to take a panoramic shot, a film, a photography mobile. You would have all experimented and you would have taken a couple of good pictures as well. So that is you can take that as like an example of panorama, what panoramic means. So that we are applying here in radiology, and here the area that is going to be covered is going to be in three different frames. That is your left side of the face, the center portion, and the right side of the face. But if you notice, we all know that it is not arranged and laid out flat for us to just take it in a single frame. So you might have to take multiple images and then put it together, and it has to be laid out as a flat image. So so panoramic radiography works. So an orthopantomograph. So it covers. It's like I told you, it covers from the anterior portion almost for most adults, from the cervical vertebrae from the one side to the other. Hence covering the entire mandible and maxillary apparatus, making it very efficient for dentistry. So the more defined one will be the mandible, and maxilla not as defined as mandible. We'll see the reasons as we go on why, and we'll see the remaining factors about panoramic radiograph as well. A little bit about the history. It was Dr. Y.V. Partero. He's called the father of panoramic radiography. He kind of invented the slit beam method. The initial term that was used to define this was parabolography. So here, what Dr. Y.V. Partero did is, instead of using one burst shot, just like how we click one picture, one burst, one shot, what he tried to do is he tried to use a narrow slit beam and started selectively exposing the film in particular area to achieve a certain area of focus into the film. Later laid the foundation for Dr. Numata and others to take further proceed and take a panoramic radiograph of the dentition in 1933. He used a long curved placed a film as a long curved film, placed it lingually to the teeth, and an X-ray source was rotated around the patient's head. So here the difference between what Dr. Numata tried to achieve and what we are doing today is that Dr. Numata, he took a flexible film and he put it inside the patient's mouth, and he put it lingual or palatal behind the arches, and he through a narrow slit beam he started exposing from one end and went on to expose until the other end. so that he was able to achieve the entire mandible, like you see in the picture below. He was able to what he tried to achieve was to take the entire mandible in one film. He wanted the entire mandible in one film. So like that, like for upper and lower it were done individually, then later a larger film was used. But then at some point realized that with film placed intraorally, it was both uncomfortable for the patient, and also the amount of structure that is covered by the film sometimes is not like it's not adequate, it's not serving the purpose. We came out with placement of the film outside the outside the mouth, that is extraorally. So both the source and the receptor were placed extraorally. Prior it was intraoral, it was just like an intraoral radiograph, like an IOPA how you take, but now the film was placed extraoral. So this is just a sequence of the evolution of the panoramic radiograph machine. As you can see, the initial machine how it was, and the later on. So there were significant improvements that came along. Though what Dr. Partiro and Numata did laid the foundation for panoramic radiography, we have come a long way, because they started this somewhere around in the 1940s, and since then it has been in development and it has come a very long way, and we have significantly improved in terms of quality of the panoramic image we are achieving. We'll see them as we go on together. So what are the uses for panoramic radiograph? Before we dive into the mechanism and working of the panoramic radiographs, let's see what its uses and indications are. Uses are when there are any bony lesions to be identified, especially in the mandible and maxilla, any unerupted teeth, grossly neglected mouth, and to assess the periodontal bone support in when it, and especially when it is generalized. Ideally, from a periodontal point of view, from periodontist point of view, an OPG is not a very ideal modality for uh, bone level assessment because of its magnification error, because you will not be able to measure the depth, and you will not know the accuracy. Their concern is about the accuracy with the panoramic, but today's manufacturers have weeded out most of the discrepancies that comes with magnification and distortion, and the measurements are more or less accurate if taken properly. So an OPG can actually be used to assess the general periodontal status of a patient, especially let us say when you want to do a post-treatment evaluation. Like for example, you have done a like a flap surgery with grafting, with bone grafting and all that, and you want to do an evaluation, an OPG can come in handy. So that or the alternate for OPG was that especially when periotherapy was done, the alternate was full mouth radiographs. One of the most prominent one of the departments which uses full mouth radiographs prominently is periodontology, where we take a set of like 10 radiographs, 10 IOPs, and compile it to get a full mouth kind of to get the understanding of full mouth and their periodontal structures. So that multiple exposures can be avoided, and thus patient chair time, stress to the patient, and all this can be avoided with a single OPG. Orthodontic assessment, it is important prior both prior and during the course of orthodontic treatment and post orthodontic treatment. OPG is used for the assessment of the dentition, whereas the bone is assessed using a cephalogram, lateral cephalogram, which we'll see later. But the dentition needs to be assessed because it's the tooth that you are moving, and it has to be monitored as well. So pre-ortho, interim, during the course of orthodontic treatment, and post-ortho, OPGs are taken. And in case of antral diseases, especially related to the floor and the anterior and posterior walls of the maxillary sinuses, the any pathologies can be identified, or any artifacts that is, or sometimes trauma, or due to certain conditions there will be aspiration of foreign elements into the antrum, and OPG can be very useful in terms of assessment as to or locating them within the antrum. And destructive diseases of the articular surfaces. Here we have to remember that it can only do an assessment primarily of the condyle and to some extent the articular eminence. It is not a very ideal radiograph to assess everything about the temporomandibular joint. It mainly focuses on the destructive disease of the articular surfaces, that is any disease to do with the bone like osteoporosis, etc. And pre-implant planning to assess the vertical bone height for placement of implants in patients. So what are the principles of panoramic radiography? Here, what you understand is that tomography, it means slices or sectioning of the radiographs. So it is based on the principle of reciprocal movement of the X-ray source and image receptor around the central point or plane in which the object interest is located. So there will be a center of rotation, and there will be an arm in which the source and the um, receptor will be positioned straight against each other, and the object of interest will be located centrally. So what will happen is there will be a reciprocal movement. That is, reciprocal means while your source is moving towards the right, your receptor will be moving towards the left. So there will be a reciprocal movement, so that the X-ray from the source passes through the object of interest and is received by the receptor opposing it. So there is no any lag. If the reciprocal movement does not occur, then there is going to be a lag in terms of receiving the image details. So in this we have to consider two things. First thing will be is the point of rotation. So I told you that there will be a reciprocal movement and it will be like a semicircular movement around the head. So let us say for if you are going to put a center point and if you are going to make a like a semicircular movement, it is going to be a half circle. And we know how a circle is. It is like round in shape. It will be a half round. But the shape of our head is not exactly round. It is oval in shape, or in orthodontic terms, what we call oligocephalic. So it is not exactly round in shape. So if you are going to put a round in an oval object, then you're going to have evidently going to have some discrepancy. That is, some structures will become more closer to the source and receptor, and some structures will become far away. So to overcome that over a period of time, this is what I was talking about prior, that we have come a long way in terms of developing the OPG. So what we have done here is that we have developed multiple point. So first we had a single point rotation, then we saw that there was a lot of magnification and distortion. Then we came with 2 point. Now what we then later we had 3 point. Now what we have is a 3 point center of continuous movement. That is, there is 3 point of rotation, but there is also continuous movement and shift between the center of rotation, so that the discrepancy, that is that closeness of the receptor and the the source of the X-ray, that discrepancy with the object is kind of like avoided. So what happens is it will start at one point. In the first image you can see that there are multiple lines here and there, but if you just focus within the mandibular area, you can see that there is a triangle that is being formed. So the 3 points of the triangle will be the main center of rotation. That is, this center of rotation will not be stationary. The center of rotation will keep shifting. So once it starts, the center of rotation will move along with the arm of the source and receptor, and while the reciprocal movements keeps happening, this center of rotation will keep constantly moving towards this, between this triangle, so that we do not have any magnification and distortion. Now what we use is a continuously moving center of rotation. This is one principle. Second one is the second image that you see. So while we are taking an OPG, we know that we are using an X-ray, so we are not going to get that much of a soft tissue detail. So what we are going to maximum get is what we are trying to achieve is the hard tissue, and we are trying to get details of the maxilla and mandible. And while the remaining parts of the hidden neck region is not that relevant for us when our focus primarily lies in the maxilla and mandible. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to bring them into focus. So to understand this easily, let me give you an example. So we again, I'll use your mobile camera as a reference, where when you try to shoot a picture using your mobile camera, you can see like a small square or something popping up here and there. So you just place that square in exactly the object which you want to want to take a picture of. You press that and that comes into focus, and remaining everything else goes a little bit out of focus. If you know what a portrait mode is, understanding this will be a little more easier. So you would have all taken portrait shots to put in your Facebook DP and Instagram and everything. So I'm sure you're all very you're all very familiar with portrait photographs. So you bring the person as the center, you bring them into focus, and remaining everything else blurs out. So similarly here, we are trying to bring the maxilla and mandible into focus, and we are blurring out everything else. That is what this focal trough is. But here the thing is that we cannot, like how we do in our mobile camera, we cannot just click on the maxilla and mandible and try to bring it into focus. So what we try to do here is that we try to bring the maxilla and mandible into the focus area. That is done while positioning the patient. Okay, so the maxilla and mandible is brought into the focus area, so that that focus area is called the focal trough. What we call the focus area is called the focal trough here in OPG, and that focal trough, only that structures that lie within the focal trough. A focal trough is a three-dimensional horseshoe shape, just like how it is shown in the second image. It's a three-dimensional horseshoe shaped area. When we bring the object within the focal trough, whatever object lies within the focal trough will be brought into focus, and everything else will be blurred out. So these are the two important principles that we have to understand for orthopantomime. So this is how we take an OPG and how we position the patient. So patient is brought into the setup, and patient is asked to remove all the ornaments, metallic ornaments, because we will be getting ghost images, and sometimes there will also be image noise if there are if the metal is very heavy metal, and just the head and neck region. And generally we tell them to remove all the metal objects just in case, but preferably just the head and neck will just do. And all the ornaments are removed, then the patient is brought into position. Here you have to notice that the patient is biting on something, so that biting will be the central focus area where you are trying to bring the maxilla and mandible. So after you do that, you set up, the image goes around, and your OPG is gotten in your screen. This is what as far as digital OPG goes up. So this is again what I was trying to explain prior. So prior we had films. Now we don't, unless or until there are a few institutions and a few very old hospitals which still hold on and use film based orthopantomogram, but most of them have transitioned from film based to digital orthopantomograms. So we do not have the problem of film anymore, because when it comes to film, you need to in the receptor, what we currently use is a flat panel receptor, which every moment that X-ray passes through the object, and it is sent, just like how you take a burst shot. Like again, if you are familiar with your mobile camera, there is something called as a burst shot. So one click, it will take some 10 pictures, 20 pictures, depending on your camera capacity. Like it will take a sequence of images. You just have to click once, but it will take 10, 20 images. So something like that. So what happens is, now the sensor is tuned in such a way, the flat panel sensor is tuned in such a way that constantly while it gets exposed, it will take the image, transmit it, then it will take the image, transmit, take the image, transmit, and it happens in milliseconds variation, so that there is no any lag, and you keep you're able to get the sequence of images very clearly, whereas in the film, has to manually be moved. What you see in the left side picture, you see a disc that has been drawn in the this thing. So a disc or a roller will be there, which will roll the film from one end to the other end when the reciprocal movement happens. So the slit of beam passes through the object, and it goes and records on the particular portion of the film. Here again, when we used a film, we had to use a cassette, and the cassette had to have an intensifying screen, and then we have processing. We Apart from taking, before taking, we have to take the cassette into the dark room. Inside the dark room only we can load the film into the cassette. Then we bring the cassette out, load it into the machine, then we expose the radiograph, then we take it out, then again take it inside the dark room, open, then we do the processing just like how we do for IOPA. We put it through developer water and fixer, we do the processing, and we view the image in the viewer. So the second image depicts as the inverted lambda that you see there depicts the movement of the center of rotation. So it starts at one point, then moves anterior, and then it again progresses to go to the posterior part. This is the pattern of the movement of the center of rotation, and it has been explained in the picture. Again, this is what focal trough or the image layer is. It's a three-dimensional curved zone where the structures lying within this layer are reasonably well defined on the final panoramic image. So this is the pattern of exposure of the film on the panoramic radiograph, how it will be recorded in a film. Like I told you priorly, it is a slit beam. So I talked about the focal trough, about where when the object is placed within the focal trough, the image comes into focus. The objects within the focal trough are in focus, and that are out or out of focus. So this is just an cross-sectional image to show, like in the first image A, you can see that both the mandibular and maxillary teeth are within the focal trough. That is the two strong lines that you see, or the focal trough, are placed within the focal trough. So it means that both the images are in focus. But when the patient doesn't bite properly or doesn't come within the focal trough, these are the discrepancies that can happen: A, B, C, D, and E. So we'll see what will be the consequences we go on further. So the patient is biting properly, and it is brought well within the focal trough. The object is brought well within the focal trough. Like in the image B that you see, everything will be like in focus. Let us say the patient bites a little anterior and comes way in front of the focal trough. Then you can see that, just for the reference, a concentric ring has been placed in the uh, below the lower anteriors to show what kind of image distortion that happens when the object is not brought within the focal trough. So when he bites a little anterior, you can see that the ring narrows down. The first image you see is the proper round ring that you see exactly like you see it on the actual patient, and the second one is when they come beyond the focal trough in the front, then there is distortion, which means there will be a little bit of elongation, and when they go way far, a little beyond behind the focal trough, then there is shortening, or there is magnification of the images that happens when go away from the focal trough. So what are the concepts that are there in interpreting the panoramic radiograph? So the panoramic radiographs are taken, uh, more than taking of the panoramic radiograph, it is the interpretation for us that is the most important, because now uh, most of the panoramic radiographs now are handled by taking, or the taking will be handled by a technician, and in only in some cases the doctor themselves do it. But for us, the main priority will be is interpretation of the radiograph, where we have to read the x-ray and derive information from it. So here the things to consider is the structures are flattened and spread out. The midline structures may project as single images and double images. Example: the hard palatine tori, bone of hyoid, and epiglottis. Ghost images are formed. We'll see a little bit about ghost images as we go on further, and we'll also see what are the soft tissue spaces and air spaces that are within a panoramic radiograph. Then relative radiolucencies and radio opacities are seen, and panoramic radiographs are unique. So here we can probably split it into three parts. We have to study the critical structures, then we have to study the relative structures. Critical structures is what we expect to see in the radiograph, and from which we want information from. Let us say the maxilla and mandible. Let us say your focus is going to be the mandible, especially the mandibular. You're looking for some lesions within the mandible, entire course of mandible. So your mandible will become the critical structure. So relative structures will be like, for example, will be the cervical spine, and let us say your maxilla. In this case, when your mandible becomes critical, will also become in terms of in a way relative structure, because your focus is on the mandible. And in today's machines, you can even section and take the panoramic radiograph. You don't have to completely expose and take it from edge to edge. You can take a section of panoramic radiograph as well, and you can take a very small area of panoramic radiograph as well. So what are the structures that are critically seen in a orthopantomogram? The condyle, please correlate with the numbers, the neck of the condyle, and the sigmoid notch, the coronoid process. These four we assess in especially in mainly in two conditions. One is to understand degenerative disorders. If the patient has any degenerative disorders, we observe the structure of the condyle, the condylar neck, and the sigmoid notch, and also to see the if we need structural change of the condyle in degenerative, like osteomyelitis example. And another one is trauma. When there is any trauma, through and through trauma that affects, and sometimes there will be dislodgement of the entire condyle accordingly. Then we see the coronoid process. The coronoid process is mostly overlapping. Since the patient is partially closing his mouth, it will be seen overlapping or very close to the third molar. Sometimes in some patients it will reach as as far as the second maxillary molar. Most of the time it will be overlapped, but you can see the outline of the coronoid process clearly in most cases. And then the ramus of the mandible, again a very important structure which can be assessed with panoramic radiograph, where panoramic radiograph is very key in terms of assessment. Then you have your inferior dental canal or inferior nerve canal, the angle of the mandible, the body of the mandible, the mental foramen, and the symphysis mente and external oblique ridge. When it comes to mandible, the amount of information that is uh, that is given out by a panoramic radiograph is almost, you can say, unparalleled at this range of radiation exposure and this range of time duration taken. The amount of information that is given out by the orthopantomograph when it comes to maxillary dentition and the mandible as whole is almost unparalleled. They offer that much information already. And when we go to the maxillary, temporal, and zygomatic structures, first we have the pterygopalatine fossa, second we have the pterygoid plate and external auditory canal, and then we have the zygomatic arch. What we have to understand here is when it comes to the maxilla, there are too many overlapping structures. Although we are trying to bring the maxilla into focus, our main key interest of the or the critical structure for us is going to be the maxillary arch, but there are other structures kind of like in close relation to it, like what we see here on the picture here, the lateral wall of the maxilla, the inferior wall of the maxilla, the inferior concha, the zygomatic arch, so there is going to be too much of overlapping. So identifying each structure with their outlines becomes essential for us to differentiate. Otherwise, it could be easily mistaken to be a pathology or some form of radiographic artifact. Then the surrounding structures will be your articular eminence, which you will be able to see to some extent, but diagnostically we will not go for an OPG if you want to
specifically study an articular eminence. You will rather go for a TMJ projection of your extraoral radiographs. And then you have your glenoid fossa, the anterior arch of the C1, the cervical vertebrae, that is, and styloid process, the body of C2, and your hyoid bone. Then you have something called as air shadows. We all know that the entire head and head region, we have a lot of air spaces, starting from the airspace that is within the oropharynx and the maxillary sinus and the various sinuses and cavities that are there. We have a lot of empty airspace structures, which will be shown as a shadow in the orthopantomograph. In air shadows, you have the nasal cavity, and you have the nasopharynx, and you have the oropharynx, and you have the glossopharynx, and you have the external auditory canal. And soft tissue shadows, we all know that soft tissue is not generally shown. Based on the thickness of the soft tissue, it can manifest as mild radiolucent shadows in the X-ray. So the based on the incidence, the structures that you can generally see is the soft palate, the dorsum of the tongue, especially if the tongue is not positioned properly. So when you take an OPG, the general indication is that you ask the patient to touch the roof of the palate with the tip of their tongue. That is the general indication. Then so this is to avoid the shadow of tongue along the anteriors, maxillary and mandibular anteriors. Then you have your shadow of your pinnae, that is your ear, and epiglottis and the posterior pharyngeal wall. So that brings us to ghost images. So what are these ghost images? It is so when you take an OPG, I told you there is going to be a reciprocal movement and there is going to be a semicircle. So it means that let us say, for example, you while the source is on your left side, the focus probably will be on your left side of the mandible, right, or the right side of the mandible. But when the source comes to your right side, this is automatic first, okay, which means the image is going to be taken twice. It is not taken single time, it is taken twice. But depending on which side the source and receptor is, that one particular side will be brought into focus, and when the same thing happens the second time from the opposite side, it will be taken out of focus. But an image is manifested twice in the same film. So this image that you see on the screen is a perfect example. So you can see that the patient is wearing her earrings, and you can see the manifestation of the earrings there within the maxilla and mandible as well. This is a ghost image, and this shows that it has been recorded twice. So like I said before, images are recorded twice, so we are trying to use the highlighted one becomes the primary image. But certain structures, especially structures which lie in the midline, tends to get repeated twice. So we'll see what are the structures that are repeated twice as we go. So what are the ghost shadows that we see? Apart from the cervical vertebrae that you see at both sides of the mandible, you will also see the shadow of the cervical vertebrae behind the mandible and maxilla in the central line, the shadow of the cervical spine. Because like I told you, it is recorded twice. Although it is not in focus, even its out of focus image tends to give a certain impression in the radiograph. Then you have your hard palate, and you also have your posterior mandible, which is kind of repeated. So this is just an example to show you how these ghost images are formed. Like I told you, there is double projection there. So these ghost projections happen. For So what are the advantages of general advantages of panoramic imaging? So it has a broad area of coverage. It has low patient radiation dose, and the typical effective dose is 9 to 26 microsievert, almost equivalent to one chest X-ray. But this is manual. Now it has come down even less, And now with digital panoramic radiography we can take sections of panoramic radiography, which enables reducing the amount of radiation exposure almost equivalent to that of 2 or 3 IOPS. That is, if you are taking a very small section of panoramic radiograph for a patient. And convenience, and in case of trismus where the patient is not able to open the mouth and hold an intraoral film inside his mouth, and also useful in patient education. When you put the whole jaw out as an image, the upper and lower jaw, when you flatten it and when you show it to the patient, it becomes much more easy and convenient for the patient to study and understand the images much better. So what are the faults that happen with panoramic radiographs? So patient rotation. Let us say the patient has moved either to the right or left while the image acquisition process is still on. Then what will happen is that the resultant image will result in magnification and distortion on both sides, like seen in the image. Lead apron artifact. Generally, we do not advise the patient to wear a thyroid collar because thyroid collar to some extent protrudes in some patients, can extend until the lower border of the mandible, thus interfering with the field of or the focal trough. So in those cases, or let us say the patient is wearing the lead apron very high, so you can see a lead apron artifact. We generally do not recommend a thyroid collar. The patient will only be wearing a lead apron without the collar. So interpretation, again, keep in mind uh, all the factors that were told to you before in previous slide while interpreting the radiograph. So we analyze the critical structures and we also analyze the relative structures that are there in the radiographs. And the critical structures will be our area of focus depending upon whatever the pathology it is, and everything other structures will become relative anatomy, and we have to take them into consideration too. So there can be sometimes incidental findings, like for example an odontome or a maxillary antral polyp. They are all mostly incidental findings. They will not manifest themselves that easily. Patient will not show any symptoms, and they will be like for example you are trying to look at a mandibular teeth, but incidentally you might also find a antral polyp in the patient. So certain incidental findings can happen in relative anatomy also, so we have to visualize them too. But you start with the critical anatomy, then progress to the relative anatomy, then have a general overview of the radiograph. So this is just a food for thought. So here is an panoramic image of an adult where you have an cystic lesion that you can see associated with an impacted tooth on the left side of the mandible, involving the body and almost the angle of the mandible as well, angle and ramus as well. So uh, please type to comment as to what your provisional or what your radiographic diagnosis for this lesion can be. Another example where you can see like a radio opacity involving the mandible is the osteosarcoma, which is an aggressive and expansional lesion where you can study the pattern. So just like how in IOPS, the another significant factor in terms of diagnosing pathologies or lesions in orthopantomographs is there is the pattern or their appearance, how they appear in a panoramic radiograph. So a lot of radiographs with the same lesions have been analyzed and assessed for us to come to this conclusion, where for example in osteosarcoma you kind of notice a sun ray appearance, sun ray reaction or an appearance, and similarly for others you have other appearances such as ground glass appearances. You have soap bubble appearances that happens in multilocular cystic lesions like OKC. And another phenomenon is Daphne bone cyst. It is not a true cyst. It is just a small a corticated defect that is seen in the posterior part of the mandible. But since the cortication of the border, it will actually appear like a cyst, whereas in actuality It is just a small anatomical, call it a deformity, or we can call it a modification, but which will be manifested as a like a cystic lesion. Then we have fibrous dysplasia, where we are able to appreciate the ground glass appearance in the mandibular region, and which is demonstrated here in the image. Then another important usage of orthopantomograph when it comes to mandible is assessment of trauma, that is fractures, and here again it's a demonstration as to how fracture is demonstrated in an fracture of the mandible in the anterior region is demonstrated in the uh, orthopantomogram. Condylar neck fracture, like I told you prior, we can use orthopantomograph in relation to the condyle for two reasons. One is to study the any deformative or degenerative diseases in related to the condyle, and second is when it comes to trauma, that is when there is subcondylar fractures or bilateral or unilateral condylar fractures in patients, that can be clearly visualized using an ortho. So these are the indications, uses and applications and principles when it comes to panoramic radiography. Understanding panoramic radiography, like I said before, is very essential because it has almost become staple. Now even private clinics, smaller clinics, because of the development, that is the way the machine has evolved, because of its very small footprint, even smaller clinics are able to engage or have their own panoramic machine, and it has become essential in most of the branches of dentistry. Panoramic imaging is used efficiently for for both diagnosis and treatment purposes. So understanding its principle, its applications is very key, and most important of it all, interpretation of panoramic imaging. And moving on to the other extraoral radiographs. So the terminologies that will be commonly coming across will be the posterior view, the lateral view, the axial view, the sagittal plane, or the radiographic baseline or the cantomeatal line. It's an imaginary line. You would have come across this in ortho. It's a line that extends from the outer canthus of the eye to the external auditory meatus, and this is used like a reference marker when you want to position the patient for an extraoral radiograph. And then terminologies like parallel and perpendicular. Parallel is two lines parallel, similar to each other, and perpendicular when it is at right angles. And central beam is the central ray of the from the X-ray source. So move on to the this thing. So this is a typical extraoral radiology setup. So it can be taken in two positions: patient lying down and patient standing straight. The most common X-rays that are taken while patient is standing straight will be your chest X-rays and your head X-rays, head and neck X-rays. Head and neck X-rays can be taken while the patient is lying down as well, but in most cases, if the patient is unless or until it's not critical, and if the patient is like non-ambulatory or something, then it you can make these adjustments accordingly, whether you want to take it in a lying down position or the advantage here is that it is not as the head of the X-ray here, or the source, the head X-ray head here is not as does not have all the movement abilities just like an intraoral machine. It can probably, in most of the cases, it can move only in two planes, that is the vertical and horizontal, vertical plane, and in some cases the horizontal plane also, but its movement limit, because of the heaviness of the machine, is restricted to a certain dimension. So we have to keep that in mind before we start doing this. And again, in extraoral machine positioning, then we can adjust the kV and MA, that is the how much of intensity is required. Because of this makes it easy for us to get a very clear. Now in place of film, we use either we use a digital cassette or a flat panel sensor, or we use a digital sensors like PSP or CMOS to take the radiograph. So conventional, we had cassette with intensifying screens and grid and a bucky table, where the cassettes will be latched on. But now we have digital radiographs, and now in digital we have flat panel sensors and other digital sensors, which makes our job easy, where all the processing and the preloading and preparation for the radiographs can be modified. So to start off with, we have the cephalometric and skull views, where we have the lateral cephalogram, and modification, or you can call in another variant of it, is the true lateral. Then we have the submental vertex. Then we have the Waters view, the PA view, or the PA skull, or PSF, as it is called. And a modification to that, we have the rotated PA, and then we have the reverse Townes view. And in mandibular oblique lateral, we have mandibular ramus and mandibular body. So we'll see a few of them individually. First, to start off with, the lateral skull or lateral cephalogram. So this covers mainly the anterior portion of the skull and the mandible. This is essentially taken mostly in orthodontic treatments, and the patient is positioned parallel to that of the cassette, and that is the mid sagittal plane, the central line that passes from the head to the toe, which dissects a person into half. It's called the mid sagittal line. The mid sagittal line is placed positioned parallel to that of the filum, and the central ray is perpendicular to the filum, and the image is taken, and hence we get the lateral cephalogram, which is used in orthodontic treatments for cephalometric analysis, and it is also to some extent taken during orthodontic surgeries also, for assessment by both surgery and orthodontics. Whereas a true lateral view, in comparison to the lateral cephalogram, covers the entire head along with the maxilla and mandible, and the indications for them are, the procedure is literally the same, except we are increasing the view, that is, we are increasing the field of view, and we are covering the entire head. And again, the mid sagittal line will be parallel to the filum, and the filum will be parallel to that of the central beam. And the indications for true lateral are fractures of the cranium and cranial base, middle third facial fractures, and to investigate frontal, sphenoidal, and maxillary sinuses, diseases of the skull, especially in Paget's and multiple myeloma, hyperparathyroidism, and tumors of sella turcica. Here you can see the copper beaten appearance of the skull, which is a general condition which is seen in Paget's and hyperparathyroidism. Then you have PA skull view, where you have the occipito-frontal view. Here, the patient is facing the film, and the canthomyatal line, that is the line that passes from the outer canthus of the eye to the from the outer canthus of the eye to the tragus of the ear, is positioned at 10-degree angulation, plus 10-degree angulation to the film, and the central beam is perpendicular. In most of the cases, the central beam will always be perpendicular to the film if you are planning to make both the source and the receptor stationary. So the modification will be made in use with the positioning of the head of the patient. But if the patient cannot move that much, if the patient is not cannot move that much, or he cannot stand, if you are taking it in a lying down position, then the same amount of modification what you are trying to apply to the head position, the head can be made stationary, and the source, that is the cone, the head radio x-ray head, can be angulated. So it is just an adjustment. Either you can make movement, either you can make the receptor and source stationary, and you can make the head movable, or you can make the receptor and the object stationary, and you can make the source movable. That depends upon what type of patient you are trying to take, and for what type of radiograph you are trying to take. So for PA skull view, the canthomyatal line is 10 degree to the 10 degree plus 10 degree to the film, and this is achieved by adjusting the head position of the patient, and the central beam is perpendicular to that of film. And the indications for this is fractures of the skull vault, mandibular fractures, especially the posterior third of the body, angle, ramus, and the lower condylar neck, and frontal sinus, examination of the frontal sinus, and the conditions affecting the cranium, and to identify any intracranial calcifications, mandibular and maxillofacial deformities, tumors, and cysts. Moving on to Waters view, or it is otherwise called the paranasal sinus view. The reason it is called is we are able to visualize most of the sinuses, nasal and paranasal, in this projection. And in this projection, the canthomietal line is at 37 degree with the film. Central beam is perpendicular to the film, and when the mouth is while taking this radiograph, you can take it in two variations: mouth closed and mouth open position. Preferably, the general indication is to take with the mouth open so that you are able to even see the sphenoidal sinus. Indications is for investigations of sinuses, especially the maxillary antrum, which you can see on the either side of the maxilla, here in this image that is shown on the right side, and the frontal sinus, again it is demonstrated here, the ethmoidal and sphenoidal sinuses, and the fractures, especially when it comes to the Lefort fractures, fracture lines, assessment of the fracture, Lefort fracture lines, and complex zygomatic fractures, nasoethmoidal and orbital blowout, and coronal process fractures. Then the submental vertex view. Here, the patient tilts the head extremely, so that the canthomietal line is almost parallel to that of the film, and the central beam is parallel to the film. It is it is indicated and very useful in terms of assessment of fracture of the zygomatic arches. And if you want the zygomatic arch to be highlighted, then you can make a modification to this submental vertex view. You can ask the patient to tilt their head a little more, where the zygomatic arches become more prominent, which is called the jug handle view. And then you can also assess the destructive and expansile lesion of the palate, the pterygoid lesion, and the pterygoid region and the base of the skull. And then the sphenoidal sinuses can be assessed. Jug handle view, this is the modification that I was talking about. Submental vertex, you ask the patient to tilt their head a little more, so that the zygomatic prominence, the zygomatic arch, the thin line of bone can be produced. Then we have a reverse Townes view, where instead of the patient looking up, the patient will look down, and this is especially useful if you want to assess the high fractures of the condylar necks, the intracapsular fractures of TMJ, and condylar hypoplasia and hyperplasia. And here the canthomietal line is at a negative 30 with the film, and the central beam is perpendicular to that of the film. To summarize with, although we have advanced, let us say in terms of CT, CBCT, and very higher modality of images, we have to carefully evaluate the patient, and based on the requirement, and if our needs can still be achieved with an extraoral radiograph, which significantly minimizes patient radiation exposure and the amount and duration of time the patient is being exposed to, we should still go with extraoral radiography for doing our assessments and do the radiographs. And for that, understanding panoramic radiographs and other extraoral imaging modalities is very important. Please go topics in your text, and if there is any doubts, feel free to ask in the Google Classroom or the e-portal, and we'll clarify it then and there.